sure without starting recorder, you feel free to start the recorder. But I've got it fired up here, and let's go ahead and go. So my devotional today picked quite a few verses here, and maybe I'll have to do some shorter ones coming on. But Colossians 3:12 through 17, put on then as God chosen one, holy and beloved, compassionate hearts, kindness, humility, meekness, and patience, bearing with one another, and if one has a complaint against another, forgiving each other, as the Lord has forgiven you, so you also must forgive. And above all these put on love, which binds everything together in perfect harmony. And let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts, to which indeed you were called in one body. And be thankful that the word of Christ dwell in you, richly teaching and admonishing one another in all wisdom, singing psalms and hymns and spiritual songs with thankfulness in your hearts to God. And whatever you do, in word or deed, do everything in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God the Father through him. So I was thinking this was appropriate of things that we should think about as we go through times of stress, because stress doesn't necessarily always bring out the best in people, and myself in particular. And are you loving God with abandon during these times of stress? And are you loving those around us, even in these stressful times? So any comments or that anyone like to add? Okay, moving on to the administrative items. The midterm is due by Monday at midnight. I actually had one student who actually already submitted his midterm, and he actually did quite well, or I can tell. I haven't quite got to looking at the last problem, the last question on the midterm, but it looks like he was doing well. So the other thing is the project individual work activity log is due also on Monday by midnight, and then your project design document is due on Friday. And so we were going to look a little bit more at software requirements specification, and hopefully get into Chapter 11 configuration management. But if we don't, that's all right too. So any questions about the class or the assignments coming up, or any of the quizzes or such?
I have got one, and that is, so we've just had this midterm that covered, or we're about to have this midterm that covers up to whatever point it was. Is there going to be another test closer to the end of the semester that covers any other chapter material,
software engineering 1, it will be the final. There will not be another midterm. So the last one would be the final.
Okay.
Yeah, only one midterm in this class. Any other questions?
On Canvas, it says you have a Chapter 2 quiz posted. What is that about? It says there's another Chapter 2 quiz. It's called Chapter 2 Quiz Extra Questions.
Oh, that was not supposed to be posted. It was basically in formulating all the questions for the Chapter 2 quizzes. I had more than I wanted to give, and so I was juggling and trying to decide which ones. So it was actually just sort of bookkeeping for myself. So you can ignore that. For some reason that's posted. It was not intended to be posted, but yeah, those extra questions for Chapter 2 were just bookkeeping for me, managing my questions, and it should not have been posted. So yeah, you don't have to go back to Chapter 2.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah. All right. So
actually got one more.
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt. Sure. Is the final going to be cumulative?
The final probably will not be cumulative. Let's see. Well, I guess it will. It will be cumulative because I definitely hold out the option to have design problems, but it will be heavily weighted toward the later chapters. But just as a hint, UML design will most likely be on there. Probably requirements as well. I can't. Yes, probably requirements as well. The rest of it I consider very much overview and terms kinds of things, but it will be heavily focused on some of the key components that I want you to learn, which is requirements, design, and probably a little bit on implementation. Any other questions? Okay, so I'm going to do some impromptu questioning of you. So, Addie, how is your project going, and what obstacles are you running into, and what can you tell me about the status of your project? You can either speak, or if you don't have audio hooked up, you can send me a chat message and I could just repeat it to the class. So Addie says it's going well. We are running into some issues with the battery API and figuring out the graphics. So how has the teamwork been going, and how has it been coming up with your meetings, scheduling your meetings, getting around schedules and that kinds of issues? We really don't have scheduled meetings. We just text each other. Okay, so you're using texts and offline or sort of communication where both parties don't have to be present, and then they have the project posted on GitHub. Excellent. That's good that you're using GitHub, and I would imagine that your biggest risk factor that you've determined in your project is the .NET or Microsoft API for the battery. Is that correct? Yeah. So Addie's comment was, yes, that has been very confusing. So we can see that their team has been addressing that risk factor because that's the biggest risk factor to the project is that part. And so they're taking that head on now. And you should also consider risk management. If you have problems handling, what ways can you use to mitigate that risk or get around that risk? Okay, so let's go to yes.
Can
go
I
ahead.
jump in for just a sec with the microphone?
Sure. Yeah.
Trying not to
So
throw her under
Jason,
the bus
her
quite so much.
teammate. Yes. Go ahead.
Yeah, I would say the main issue hasn't specifically been the .NET API, but more just the general knowledge of the entire architecture of .NET.
And Visual Studio. Yes.
Yeah, just not having a lot of experience in that. So trying to figure out what all would be the best options to use in addition to actually trying to complete the goal.
Right. So there is this learning curve that needs to be surmounted, involved with your project using the tools and the framework. Good.
Yeah. So in more of a professional environment, probably during the risk assessment phase, it would have been good to reach out to a more experienced developer in that realm. So someone who's done a lot more .NET development and discuss it with them and figure out, is the scope of this realistic? Are the expectations realistic?
So have you reached out to online chat and online question forums?
That would be you.
Okay. All right, but I'll also look out beyond me because I'm a little rusty when it comes to the .NET. Well, at least I was able to help you some, so hopefully gave you some ideas. So let's have Tanner. What is the status of your project, and what things have you seen? Again, chat or microphone, either one is sufficient.
I have microphone.
Okay.
It's going well so far. We were able to do the UI very well in Visual Studio and make that prototype go well. So there's not really any too big of a problems we've went into yet. We haven't really started working on the back end of the encryption part of our project yet, just because scheduling stuff and having to work around everything.
Right, with all the schedules. So how has the online or the remote development team worked, and what things have you found valuable, and what things have you considered trying to enhance your communication with your team?
Well, we're just using Discord, which is just an online chat service right now to
Yes.
pass by, like, if we're available to talk, if we want to work on the project this day, if there's a requirement coming up that we need to finish, we can just discuss it there, and we can just copy and paste the link to the file in there, so it's really easy to pass information back through.
So looking forward, what do you think is the biggest risk that you possibly might have on the project where you might run into a stumbling block that you anticipate you might?
Probably whenever we start working on the actual encryption, okay, so for those who don't remember, we're doing the triple desk encryption project, which is the taking an image and encrypting it so that it's safe. But anyway, so whenever we start actually doing that encryption part, I think that'll be a bit of a challenge.
So that may be something that you want to look at early.
Right.
The best practices is to address areas of high risk or highest risk first, so that you can get those laid to rest, because you don't want that to be something that you stumble across at the end of the project and be fighting it then, because you want to be able to go down past the mitigation early in the project rather than having to do that right at the end.
Right.
Okay.
We've been looking at other like third-party people who have worked with the same encryption that we're using. So,
Good. All right. So how about Jonathan's team? You have the I can't remember, but the checkers, some type of role RPG checkers or whatever it was. I can't remember the title.
Roguelike builder. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I've just not been great at scheduling time for everything. We've outlined basically everything that needs to happen. Just need to get on it. We have everything on GitHub, all set up, integrated with Visual Studios, and have, the prototype was really good because we could just start working on the project because it's just simple enough to use that as a demo.
Right. So how has the learning curve been with GitHub, or have you used GitHub before?
I haven't, but
I haven't either. And I'm one of the struggles of this is figuring out how to work with GitHub and Visual Studios together.
Mm-hmm. And there are separate tools that you can use to access GitHub that are standalone too. Just to point out that some of my past students have found graphical tools that are separate from Visual Studio that have been helpful, and you can use in conjunction with Visual Studio. They're not exclusive. You can use both of the tools at the same time. So yeah, there's a learning curve there. And if you've never used GitHub and if you never use version control software, it's going to be even more overwhelming. So are there resources that you can take advantage of in your learning curve process on using GitHub?
Plenty of Googling.
Yes. Yeah.
But yeah, I think I'm starting to get the hang of
YouTube tutorials?
what needs to be done.
Yeah. And it sounds like Jessica Jonathan sounds like he's starting to get a hold of GitHub. Certainly having your teammate Jessica help you on some of the best practices and some of the insights that he has gotten in using GitHub would be useful. Okay, so moving on to Jonathan Dyke. How has your project been going, and just give me an update. I think you might be still muted, Jonathan, because I could see you blinking like you're talking, but I don't hear you. Or are you chatting? He's really quiet, is what Jonathan Edwards said. Because it's interesting, your picture is actually blinking like you're talking, but I don't hear anything. Oh, wait a minute. Let's see if I can unmute him. Okay, something's wrong. We're having technical difficulties with Jonathan. He just chatted in that he doesn't know what's wrong with his mic. Can you just give me a quick chat then description of where you're at? So right now everything is functional with the project. So that's, I assume, what you've in the things that you've accomplished so far. So what's a quick rundown of what you've accomplished so far and what obstacles you've had to overcome? So right now everything is functional. The graphics and backend logic work. Good. So you've got the graphics and the logic of how. So are you actually able to have pieces moving now? Is that an accurate assessment of what I'm interpreting? Yes. Awesome. So you guys have gotten quite a bit of your work done, and I am guessing yes. It sounds like he says, and the computer plays. So I'm assessing from here that there's very little risk left in your project, and it's going along pretty well. Okay, so we just need to meet and see how far we want to go with the quality and the enjoyability, and you may be at a stage where you're open to additional functionality, where you can expand the scope of work. So that's an awesome position to be in, and Jonathan Dyke said right that is where they're at. So what I've been doing here with the students in checking the status of where people are is what I've commonly heard of as an elevator speech. Has anyone ever heard that term, elevator speech?
Isn't that where you only have like 30 seconds to like prove something?
Yes.
Not prove something, but kind of convince them of your project.
Right, to convey. Yeah, an elevator pitch is what Nathan Tompkins is saying. Yes, elevator pitch. But it also can be, so the premise is that you step into an elevator and you're with the VP of R&D, and he asked you, how's your project going? And so you need to be able to convey the essential information in a concise and understandable message before you get to, say, the third floor, where you know that he's going to be getting out of the elevator or that you're going to be getting out of the elevator. So the idea is to have the skills to present a concise and complete message, and also in that delivery of the message, understand who your audience is. So for instance, if it was the VP of marketing who's very busy, and you give him all the gory details of your implementation, that would be the wrong pitch, because he's not interested in all the details of what you've been coding. He wants a high level overview of the status of the project, not the itty bitty details that you may have in say like a stand-up meeting or something with your software project manager, where you're talking about, I'm having problems with this and this is what I've been doing. And that's not the kinds of things he wants to see. Okay, these are the risks we've assessed. We're having a problem with this area, but he doesn't want to know the itty bitty details of the coding or the API or that, because that is just not what he's concerned in. So it's understanding who your audience is, giving them the appropriate message in a short period of time. So that's what I'd like to have you get some experience doing. Certainly in software engineering too, you will be doing a lot more of that and get more expertise. But that is a very valuable skill to have. To tell you like an extreme case that I've had in that situation was I was on a project between, I had been a software project manager in the past, but on this current project, I was just one of the team members responsible for a subsection of the system. Well, it turns out that our software project manager decided to take another job to be the VP the VP in charge of market or of R&D at another company. He was leaving the company, and this particular project that I was working on was the most important project for the company at the time. It's where all the resources were being put. It was where it was of the highest priority and needed to get done, because it was basically causing the lack of this product was causing a problem for the marketing department, and the sales were dropping. And so this was a project that needed to get done. It was sort of a linchpin that was our foot in the door for our customers, for not only the product that we were creating, but for other products. Well, I came in to work early that morning, and I don't know why I came in early that morning, but as soon as I came in, the head of the R&D department, the software engineering department, pulled me aside and says, "Do you have time to talk? I need to talk to you right now." So I said, "Okay." So I'm like, "What the heck is going on?" So he pulls me into his office and says, basically, the software project manager on this team, for this team, has decided to leave the company, and we need someone to step in to be the software project manager. I want you to take over this project. And I'm like, "Are you willing to do that?" And I kind of thought for a second and said, "Sure, I'll take it on." He says, "Oh, good. I'm glad you answered yes. You have 5 minutes to think about it. We're going to have an all hands meeting with the whole company, and I want you to get up and tell the company what direction you want to take this project and how you're going to handle things, taking over for David." And
That's
so
no
I had 5 minutes, and I had to quickly assess who my audience was, which was an all hands meeting. So now we have a multi-level, and I had to come up with something succinct and to the point of what I was hoping to accomplish with this. And this was in a 5-minute period. So these things do happen, and they can be terrifying if you have not had experience doing it. So the more chances you have to be put in that situation and understand what to do, the better. So anyway, again, via Software Engineering 1 and those of you who take Software Engineering 2, that is one of the skills that I want you to get a chance to practice and get better at. So having said that, let's take a look at this document here. And I know you don't have it up yet, I am bringing it up now, hopefully. Okay. Okay, can you see the software requirements specification for battery? So Jessica says yes, and so I'm going to go ahead and go forward. If you can't see it, no, don't show that again. Okay, so here's the one of the SRS software requirement specifications that I thought was fairly well done. And so let's take a quick look of it so that those of you that had problems can see what we're looking for. So here we can see the title page, and they have replaced the group name with their actual group name from the template. So that is an area that some of you neglected to do, which is replace the template text with your own text. And if it's template text that you aren't going to be using, please take it off. It definitely looks unprofessional to have the template guidance comments still left in the document. You can keep a separate document that still has the guidance, but anything that you submit or you have up for review should have those removed. We have the introduction. Battery, a small application that monitors the status of a mobile device's battery and reports it to the user. This section provides information to aid in the understanding of the remainder of the document and the project in general. So a good overview. That's what we're looking for here. What is the purpose? What are we trying to do in the introduction? We see the document purpose, the product scope, and then the definitions and acronyms and abbreviations. So that's well done. My personal preference here for the definition, acronyms, and abbreviation is to put in a table, basically a 2-column table that has definitions, acronyms, abbreviations in the first column, and then the second column will actually have the actual definitions that's here. That's just my personal preference in terms of style. For me, it makes it easier to see at a glance. But again, that's just a personal style preference. This is certainly nice, and I should probably turn off all those punctuation things. I use that in my usage of it, but I know that for a lot of people it's kind of distracting. So let me take that off. There we go. So that makes it look better without the editing marks that shows the documentation. But again, I have a preference for putting a table there. Reference and acknowledgements. Probably in your reference to acknowledgements, you can say put something that you purposely left it blank, or there are no references and acknowledgements being used, or there's no references being used, that we're not using any specific references. And then you could add in any references, like if you're using the .NET API or whatever. So that was good. This is good. We have the overall description, the product functionality. Again, a nice, clear, concise overview what the product functionality is. It's going to display battery capacity, et cetera, et cetera. We have end users and their characteristics, and the general users, any Windows laptop owner. Again, you could elaborate on the characteristics of the user, but I think in this case, the end user is pretty well understood, and there aren't too many things to describe the characteristics of the user. They're just basically a Windows laptop user. And then the system stakeholders, which are their users in this case. We have the operating environment, which runs on x86 and AMD 64 hardware architectures and on the Microsoft.NET framework, primarily on Windows 10. You may want to actually say that it's Windows 10 because I'm guessing you're not going to be testing on multiple platforms. Oh, and actually they have which version of Windows 10 they're running, and that is 1909, which also is useful information that documents what version they will be building and testing the software on. And then they have
technically, I probably have an XP VM laying around. That'd be fun to see if it actually works.
and then you
I
could add it
doubt
to
it.
the list. Yes. Yes, that's right, Jason. And then they have a diagram. So here's an overview of what they expect the architecture to look like. The core applications, the user interface, Microsoft.NET framework, and the hardware API driver. So this is the environment they envision the application running in. So again, those aren't requirements. This is actually just the operating environment that is envisioned that this product will run under. And so this gives us a nice overview of the environment. So then we have the user interface. They have a description here. The main user interface will provide information about the user's laptop battery, and then it lists out some of the characteristics that we're looking for, and then some nice diagrams of what the user interface screens may look like. So some sample screens of what it's going to look like. And then what they've done very nicely is they've created a table of their requirements. And notice how, and a lot of the students in this class did not label the requirements. And I repeated it multiple times in class, but it's not too unusual. That's what's happened with my students in the past. They've actually had to do it, and then I have to comment that you didn't do it. So here they have functional requirement 1 is to alert their user with a notification when the percent change reaches the specified level. The only thing I have here is you may specify how they're going to be notified. Is it a sound? Is it a pop-up dialog box? Is it both? So, and that's being specific with your requirement and also giving hints to the SQA department as they write their test plan based on your requirements here. How are they going to test it? So that is one of the asset tests that I use when I'm writing requirements. If it's truly a requirement, I should be able to put on my SQA hat and say, okay, I will test it this way. I will test whether this parameter works, or I would click on this and test to make sure this happens, or I will put a timer on this and make sure that when I press this happens within 5 seconds or whatever the case may be. But I put on the SQA hat and say, this is how I would test this particular requirement and prove or verify that it has been fulfilled. And then they have the other various factors. Function 2 is calculating time remaining, calculate the wear percentage. Here you might want to be more specific, although it's pretty much just getting it from an API, so maybe not so much. And then we have IS 1.0. So here we can see that there is a naming convention for the requirements. So Jason, can you fill us in on what IS? So F was obviously functional requirements. What does IS refer to?
I can't actually remember offhand what the actual abbreviation
Yeah,
is.
and so it may be
That's
a comment section or a legend that says what those are, or put it in the
something
abbreviation.
system. I believe internal system.
Internal system. Who has charge status?
Yeah.
Charge. Okay.
I use the ones from the book.
Okay. Yes, and then UI. Oh, good. Use it for the book, and then so anyway, documenting what that is would be useful. And then UI is pretty straightforward. That's user interface requirements. User interface 1.0 display the percent change remaining. Here you may want to put how often it updates. Could be useful. Displays charger status, again, same comment. And then allow user to configure alert percent change. You may want to be more specific on how that is to be accomplished. Is it going to be a slider thing or whatever? But again, that could be a design issue too. But
yeah, we felt like the refresh rate of the percent charge remaining was more of a performance option, and that's down in non-functional requirements.
Good.
And
good.
Addy has the abbreviation correct. It's interface to systems.
Interface to systems. I see it there in the chat. Thank you. Use case diagram, the user is basically viewing or setting the configuration alert percentage. I would also probably have in here what they can view, but that's good. Good start on the use case diagram. Non-functional requirements. We have software quality attributes, the performance, the frequency of the polling of the variable that have specific battery life. This is using product will not increase device runtime on battery by more than 5%. Okay, again, probably a little bit more specific, and I would call this out as a requirement, even though it's in the non-functional. It still should probably be called out as a requirement with its own label. Security of the product cannot connect to the internet. Okay, and adaptability. So basically, you're just trying to say why we don't have specific requirements for this because it's being handled or how it's being handled. But you could phrase it in the terms of requirement. Adaptability, write the code so that each major component is encapsulated and can be. So this is the motherhood and apple pie statement. Yeah, so probably not really
wasn't entirely sure what to do for that section, since it
Yes.
seemed like a lot of them don't really apply, and some of them
Yeah.
sort of apply, so I wasn't sure whether to just omit that entirely.
Yeah, maybe it would be admit that because I think that's sort of implied. But certainly performance things are the most common. Performance, worst case, stress test situations, how many values in the database, you don't have a database, but in a project in general, how many values in the database are we going to allow? It should work with how many users for a web multi-user type environment. Again, not a multi-user environment, but these are all examples of what you would have in the non-functional requirements area. And again, I have also stated that I have no problem with mixing the functional and non-functional requirements because to me, it's sort of an artificial barrier because as you can see up in this functional place, I actually said give performance characteristics, and I usually just put them right in there with the requirements. So to me, keeping the distinction between functional and non-functional requirements, other than knowing what functional and not was meant by functional and non-functional requirements is, it's gray enough area that I don't necessarily buy in that you have to separate them. So I am okay with you deciding, okay, I'm going to have them together. Availability of the code is available to developers on GitHub. Okay, that's easily testable. Interoperability, but this would probably be in the software project plan usually rather than here, but you don't have a software project plan, so that's fine. Interoperability, if the product is ported to a toolbar or widget, it will be compatible with other common widgets and toolbars. Okay. And that kind of ties into, although you might want to think about how that might be tested in terms of requirement. Here we have future scope increases, other requirements. So these are things that were outside of the scope of the project, but may be considered for future future functionality. Good. And then their group log. So that was a nice job. And there was one other one that I wanted you to see. Okay. Oops. I need to share it. There we are. Okay. So you should be able to see the Money Munchies SRS. Okay, unless just let me know if you can't. Again.
Can.
Okay, good. So first page looks great, other than the fact that you put a B at the end of my last name, but that's okay. Something weird happened with the table contents formatting, but I'm not going to worry too much about that. Could be in the PDF rendering or whatever the case may be. So again, document purpose, they give a high-level overview. The document is meant to illustrate the objectives presented by using software titled Money Munchies. The benefits presented to the user are to provide more convenience to the user when planning home-cooked meals by being able to delegate the ingredients the user already has in their cabinet or pantry. This includes having the ability to process specific Excel sheets as forms of input to create a user-friendly operation. The following objectives of the document are to inform the user of the following criteria. Foremost, the Money Munchies software should be easy to use and learn for users to find it in the product scope. And again, the document purpose is a good place to put that motherhood and apple pie generalities that you want, because it's not a specific requirement, it's just the overview. So perfect use of the introduction is include all the goals that we are trying to accomplish here. We have the product scope. Frugal individual for the market, and all specific groups listed can be categorized, so it refers to sections below. So it's sort of a roadmap into the document below. And then we have definitions, acronyms, and abbreviations. And we have Money Munchie value is MMV. You may also want to put a short description of what that is, because that's something specific to you. And then TM is the target market. And so here we have reference to the acknowledgements, and here they did specifically call out that this was purposely left blank. It says this product does not contain any documents or web addresses to which this SRS refers. So that's a great way to handle it, so that it's clear that it was intentionally not anything was included here, that it wasn't just an oversight. Overall description, product functionality to provide user interface with help in categorizing all the ingredients they currently have, on and on the overall product functionality. We have the end user and their characteristics. We have college students, coupon enthusiasts, and busy families, and descriptions of what characteristics they are and who those end users are that we're looking at. And then they had fun with the, and I forgot what TM stands for. I'm going to have to go back up again. Target market. Yes. Okay. So they have had fun with this. They said the system stakeholders are the people using the software, and then in a current technology environment with the proper, remind me, TM again. Jump in here. Anyway, something about market. And then the team, the Money Munchies team, is also one of their stakeholders, because they are the owners of this product and potentially this company, Money Munchies company. And so they have the roles. They have Daniel Marino is the founder and director for Money Munchies, and Ian Eggleston and Nathan Johnson are the co-founders. And so there's their roles, not so much the responsibilities, not that I would expect to see roles and responsibilities in this document, but these are the stakeholders that they're envisioning. So as their burgeoning company starts up, those are the people who we're trying to answer to, and whose goals that we're looking to meet. So the environment needed to successfully run Money Munchies has been established to run in Python coding environment for specific operations systems that can include any machine that's capable of running Python code. So here they said, okay, this is the technology we use, which dictates where it could possibly run. But it also then states, which is a good thing to do, is the initial development environment or development project will support Windows 10. And that also means that's where your testing is. And then with the potential to divide Macintosh or Linux system, future directions that can be taken if any changes is needed to ensure proper operation. So then they're saying, yes, we can go into testing for Macintosh and Linux, and then do any modifications we need to make it cross-platform for these additional platforms. But what I gather here is that Windows 10 is our primary target, with the future vision of moving to these extra platforms. We see the specific requirements are user interface, and so they have quite detailed descriptions of the user interface and nice screenshots that they have inserted into the document for each section of the user interface. And the interesting thing is they've described the user interface in general before, and we'll see this later on, before getting into the requirements. So here's the overview and a complete description of the menus, and then they call out in their functional requirements all the specific requirements in association with the UI above, and they provide references to those sections. And basically then their requirements become 3.2.0. All specific menus will have a button to successfully open menu 3.111 and then close the respective windows for 3.20. So here's their requirement 3.2.0. So here they used a numbering scheme associated with the section, which is fine. But what kinds of difficulties can they run into here, having used their unique identifier for the requirement associated with the section that they're in, and the ordering of the sections that they're in? Anyone have any ideas?
As opposed to what? Like, as opposed to having like letters in the identifiers to make it more clear what
right, and
section
have
it
them
is?
and have the numbers. See, notice how this is for section 3.2 function requirements, and their identifier has 3.2 in them. They could be just one. They could be separate from the section. They could be 1.1, 1.2, 2 that have nothing to do with the requirement section, or it could be FR 1, 2, 3. Yes, that would be the other thing, but they're not as strictly tied to the section ordering. So one of the problems is, what if they remove a requirement? Generally, when you remove a requirement, that requirement identifier is also removed from the pot, because any documents that refer to it may now be incorrectly pointing to a different requirement. So you want to remove not reuse the identifier. And so we have products like Doors, which is a Rational Rose product, which is the creators of the UML family. And I think they were bought up by IBM, so I think it's now an IBM product. But Doors is a requirements document tracking that takes care of this. So what you would do is, if, let's say, 3.2.1.1 was a requirement that was removed, you would actually strike through this text but leave it in here and put some text that says a removed requirement, but you would leave it in the document, or you would put it that there's a deleted requirement, but you would leave it in there as a placeholder to remind yourself that you were no longer supposed to use that identifier. And then, simply put, if you actually had to insert a requirement in between, let's say, 3.2.1.2 and 3.2.1.3, you could just tack on a 3.2.1.2 dot or dash, probably dash 1 dash 2 or something that says it's in the middle. Usually going out in terms of the legal numbering, where you put a dot and another number, means it's a sub requirement. So probably not the best to use another dot, but maybe a dash or some type of mechanism that indicates that I've inserted a requirement in the middle. Or the other possibility is you go 3.2.1 and .9, and you just stick it in there out of order, but it's in there. Not quite as good because it makes it harder to find, but that's another way you could do it. So those are things that you would consider when you look at the identifiers, is how you do it. Like I said, a package like Doors will auto-create the identifiers for you. So you just type it in their tool, and then that label gets associated with that requirement, and then it is permanently tied to that requirement, and you don't overwrite that with a completely new requirement. You either delete the requirement and it shows as struck through, or you create a new requirement, but you don't completely replace that requirement with something unrelated. You can update the requirements based on new information, but it's still essentially the same requirements, but slightly modified. But if you have a completely new requirement, you don't want to reuse that identifier, because there could be other documents that refer to it that would then be incorrect. Okay, so again, he has functionality. The team has functionality of a plan, a menu, et cetera, and you can see here that they're all specific, very specific, and that's what I'm looking for. This is a button that displays the word "Make New." When clicked, a text dialog will appear to indicate what new meal the user wants to work on. This will update the next label next to it with what the user selected. See how specific it is and how testable it is. If I was the SQA person, I'd click on that button and see if all the things that it says is going to happen. So it is very, very testable, which is nice. That is exactly the kinds of things I want. Is this is what has to happen, and from there you look at your requirement and you say, how would I test it? That is the acid test of is this truly a requirement. The other thing that you need to be careful of is having a requirement that says that it will not do this. That's kind of a bad requirement to have, a negative requirement. So usually it may, if it either is not a requirement or you rephrase it, and I know it seems like wordsmithing, and it is kind of wordsmithing, but you rephrase it in a positive term, as in, I think there was one requirement specification that says this does not rely on internet capability. And I said, well, you don't want to have the not situation. So the way to phrase that differently is that says, if there is no internet connectivity, this software still works. So, you know, there's ways of phrasing it in the positive, or some behavior that happens rather than in the way of something that is not supposed to happen. You generally don't want requirements of what's not supposed to happen. So anyway, down below, and then we have the non-function requirements, the software quality attributes. So it says the program shall be able to run in a reasonable time frame for the data presented to the program, and take no longer than 20 seconds to fully process any single action at any menu. So here they're saying that you should see something after clicking a button within 20 seconds. So that's a good indicator, because you notice that in software packages where something takes longer than some criteria, generally you have some waiting indicator or ellipses or a little spinning clock. And that is precisely that. You want to specify how long it is before the user sees something. Otherwise, they might think the system is hung. And actually, so probably I would, and this is, you know, for the action to be completed, but you'd probably have some criteria that the user sees something within probably shorter than 20 seconds. But you have the right idea there. The program should be able to be easily modifiable to work with updates Excel. So here we should probably say that it supports what versions of Excel, and that it's important to try to support all the future versions, but the versions of Excel that we currently support is XY, right? The program should be able to secure all forms of data and be able to recover all data stored by the menus. Good. The program should be able to be maintained and repaired for convenience. So here, with minimal coupling again, that's the motherhood and apple pie kind of statement, probably in your intro rather than in your requirement section. And then the group block. So those were two of the ones that I have pulled out that did a particularly good job, and I applaud those teams for the work they did on their SRS. And for the rest of you, keep in mind, I put in some comments, and you can certainly update your document and resubmit and get additional points. And I encourage it because I think there's a lot of learning into updating the document, and they will be fairly easy points because a lot of times I specifically tell you what needs to be done to upgrade or enhance the software requirement specification. So I am definitely out of time here, right? Yes, I'm out of time. So any questions before we leave?
Yeah. Will there be a class meeting on the 10th, since that would have been Good Friday?
No, and I think I canceled it. If not, it should be canceled. I haven't heard anything about the holidays being removed, and specifically Good Friday, I would imagine would not be removed. So we will not be meeting on Good Friday.
All right.
And I will check to make sure it's updated in the calendar, but I believe it should have been removed from the calendar. But no, we will not be meeting a Good Friday. Any other questions before I stop the recording? All right, you are all excused. It was great meeting with you, and look forward to your submissions for next week and chatting with you next week.